Greetings, friends and fellow freelancers. Welcome back to another episode of Tabletop Mercenary. This week, I wanted to talk about a strategy that I have used rather extensively over the years. And it's a tool that can really help you expand your audience, get people to check out more of your stuff. And like everything else, it's important to remember as I get into this, this is not a silver bullet. This is just one more patch on the quilt that might help you eventually get to where you want to be in your career. And like everything else, it'll be kind of a pain at first, but the more something becomes habit, the more you plan for it, the easier it becomes to incorporate. Now, this week we're talking about the Cascade. Whether it's for views, whether it's for sales, whether it's for reads, the idea is always the same. More or less, what it means is that when someone checks out something you have made, whether they're reading your blog or they're watching a video on your YouTube channel or they're buying a tabletop RPG supplement that you've written, there should be something in there that links them to other related concepts or other related releases that you've had. As a good example, most folks will remember, and I do not know if this is standard practice anymore, but it was for many years, whenever you would go and you would buy a book, particularly if you bought a Stephen King book, you may remember in the front of it, there was that list of other books by the author, and they would give you all of the titles that they had. They didn't just put that there to eat up an extra page. They were hoping that if you bought this book and you read it and you liked it, you would want to check out other books by this author, so they make sure it's really easy for you to find them, because as we all remember, this in the pre-Google days, you would go to your library and you would ask your librarian, can you find me this title? Or you would go to the bookstore and you would do the same thing with the clerk. Same thing, different era. Another example for folks who have not read this particular entry of mine on my blog, I wrote an entry a while ago. It was the non-problem of making monks fit into your setting, or maybe it was your campaign. Whatever the title is, the link will be below in the description if you want to read it. But the basic idea was I had seen the discourse and the arguments back and forth about how monks inherently do not fit a Western fantasy D&D setup. And so I decided to weigh in and explain that if you want to strip all of the Eastern mythology, if you want to strip all of the Shaolin feel that inspires much of how monks are portrayed, you can do that fairly easily. And I gave examples as to what that might look like in your game if you chose to change things around and alter things. And then in the article, I linked to another piece that I had written, and it was 5 tips for playing better monks. Generally speaking, it was really hard for me to get views on a lot of my 5 tips articles because they were hosted on vocal.media, which, again, link below if you want to check out my archive. I've got several hundred articles there you can read for free. But I wanted to get more people to read my vocal pieces because those came with a higher payment if more folks read them rather than my blog, which doesn't really have ads. It's just kind of there as a platform for people to check out my work and my thoughts. So I hoped that if the article about the non-problem of making monks fit your game did really well, that would put it in front of a lot of people, and all of those people, whether they agreed or disagreed with what I was saying, would see the link to my 5 tips article. And some of them, whether they were interested, whether they were mad, would click it and check out that other article. That's sort of a one-step cascade of you deliberately set something out so that if people like this one thing you made, they then turn around and check out this other thing you've made. And the more interconnected your archive becomes, the more interconnected your work becomes, the deeper and deeper down that rabbit hole people will fall. Another example for folks who may have not checked out my Sundara Dawn of a New Age setting, it's available for both Pathfinder Classic and D&D 5e. And one of the things that makes that particular setting unique is rather than releasing very large books with, the setting and cities and whatnot, it's come out piecemeal. It's been released in supplements. So they'll have 1 city per book, or they'll have 1 species guide per book. It's very small and you can get it in little bite-sized pieces. Because of that, if you buy one of them, in the back of the supplement, you will find links to get all of the others. The idea being that if you grab a copy of Ironfire and you think this is a really cool city to put in my game, is there more to this setting, or are there other cities that I can use? You'll find links to Maud's City of Bones, you'll find links to Archbliss, the floating city of the sorcerers, etc., etc. And same thing for the species guides. If you decide you really enjoyed my take on elves or gnomes or dwarves, there will be links to the rest of the setting so that you can grab other stuff as you desire. And that works pretty well, honestly. Whenever I have a new release and I know that it's going to have a thematic connection to other stuff I've put out previously, if I watch my sales sheet, there's always going to be trickle-down sales coming in for the next week or so. We saw this earlier this past weekend, actually, where I had my new Army Men supplement came out, and a couple of folks grabbed it as they wanted the new mission, they wanted the new adventure. But because of that, there's also connections to Medals of Honor, which is the medal system I introduced for the game. There's connections to Ungentlemanly Warfare, which is the collection of booby traps for game masters to put into the system. And every time one thing gets attention, it means that folks might want to check out everything else. Now, none of that is probably new information for most folks out there. We know how human brains work, and we know how fandoms work. We know how game masters and players work. If they find one thing they like, that's usually enough to open the door and get them to check out more stuff. However, what we need to remember when we're putting things together is we have to provide as much information for our customers and clients as possible, because, and I do not wish to denigrate our own audience, people do not want to search for stuff. Sometimes you'll get lucky, someone will really get that fixation and they'll have to find everything connected to a certain creator or a certain artist or a certain author, but you cannot depend on that. You need to put it in front of them, all of the options, with a minimum amount of work on their part. If you want them to check out another article, give them the link. If you want them to buy more for a setting, you can't trust that they'll look up the setting. You have to give them exact references. You have to tell them full titles, and whenever possible, give them a link to it. If they have to do more than one click to get to where you want them to be, they're not going to show up there. So, it is important to remember when attempting to engineer a cascade, there is no guarantee. The best you can do is build the framework for a cascade to happen. Do your very best to market, to spread the word, to make sure that as many people see that tipping point of your cascade as possible. In this case, giving the example that I gave, it was getting as many people to read that one blog entry that had links to other stuff in it. But there's no guarantee a cascade is going to happen. Just as there's no guarantee a given post or given video is going to go viral. There's no way to know for certain. You can engineer as much of it as you possibly can. It could still go nowhere. You might, for some reason, fall afoul of the algorithm and it decides, no, we're not spreading this topic right now. The game that you made something for might not currently be in favor. It might have fallen by the wayside and people just aren't interested. You might have drastically misread the market, and what you thought was going to be a really popular, really controversial topic is something not a whole lot of people are really interested in, or it's a discussion that's already wrapped up and nobody wants to revisit it. Which is why you need to make sure that the cascade becomes something you plan for all of the time. Whenever you write an article, whenever you put out a blog, whenever you make a video, whenever you put out a TTRPG supplement, make sure that you have that door for people to walk through in the event they want more. And whenever possible, try and connect it thematically so that you are feeding into whatever it is your cascade is connected to. In the example I gave with my blog, it was these are people interested in reading about the monk class. It might be people who are interested in more things from this particular bit of world building or this particular RPG setting. It might be more novels by this particular author. But cascades only work when there is a logical connection between the starting point and where they go after that. Do not try to force connections between things that are really unrelated. That can often lead to people just shrugging and moving on and not participating in what you're hoping they'll do, which is leap down the rabbit hole as far as humanly possible, because the more doors you get them to walk through, the bigger and bigger, impact they have on you and your work. Whether it's they've bought more stuff that they never would have found in any other organic way, whether it's they've read a bunch of articles that they otherwise never would have come across, or they've just decided to subscribe to your channel and put on a playlist because, well, they liked that one video and they rather enjoy what you're talking about, so they want to hear more. which is a reminder for everyone out there to like, subscribe, and share if you haven't done so already. But that kind of wraps up my thoughts on the Cascade and what you can do to really make it work for you and your career. And if you have any questions, if you need more examples, let me know that in the comments down below. And if you have a particular topic you would like to see me cover in future episodes of this show, let me know that as well. I'm doing my best to hit things, well, as organically as I can, but sometimes what I think would make a good topic isn't really what you all want to hear about at that point. So I need your input, and I need you to tell me what you need to know so that you can make your career as a TTRPG creator that much smoother. But until next time, this is Tabletop Mercenary, signing off. First and foremost, thank you for staying to the end of this episode of Tabletop Mercenary. If there's a question you have about being an RPG creator, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments below so I can address it in a future episode. If you want to help me keep the lights on and keep this show going, then please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, and giving it a share on your own social media pages to help boost the signal. Lastly, if you really enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a tip by buying me a Ko-fi or becoming a Patreon patron at the links in the video description below. You'll find me on both sites under the name The Literary Mercenary.